Speakers are the Liberty Lobbyists. You've already met Paul Henry and John Hallman, and I believe they are going to start with a video presentation.
Next video features somebody that's just about on the stage. We call this one Hallman versus Libe. Senator Libe is a senator from Pinellas County.
We're not trying to be unreasonable, we're trying to be reasonable, and that's what we're asking you to take serious discussion. Please take this into consideration, and we urge your support today. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you recognize. Can I ask, what does this have, what does the government ownership of some lands, like conservation lands, have to do with private ownership of the land enough to get equity to buy a house? I mean, how does that threaten anyone's ownership of their own land? In other words, and the second part of the question is, if you're for private property rights, then one of those rights is to be able to sell your land. We're not talking about any condemnation of land. We're talking about when there's a willing buyer and a willing seller. So what's wrong about it?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman.
Your record.
Well, on to that issue, the state or government has an unfair with other buyers. Otherwise, they have money. The federal government's got money. We all have money up here. So how does somebody, if I want to buy a piece of land that's maybe some swamp land, I can't compete with y'all. Y'all can come in and buy it, so it's not fair, okay, on that issue.
But for the person that owns it and wants to get their maximum return, isn't the more competition to buy that land, the better?
Well, sure, it's better, but again, so you're only looking at the one side.
So you want to maximize what your land is worth, so why would you want to limit who could buy your land? Because now you're more buyers you have, the more that land is worth.
Now you're going to take that land off the tax rolls. It's not going to be used for productive purposes. And we are asking, just take a look. Does this serve a public service for everybody? This is a needed piece of property. Again, I think we're trying to be reasonable. I'm not saying you can't ever buy conservation land. We're just saying that there shouldn't there be some criteria?
Well, would you consider you and the people in your organization conservatives?
Sure.
Did it dawn on you that conservative and conservation are from the same root word?
Well, yes, sir. Then you're saying that individuals should not be allowed to be conservationists. You're saying that only the government can protect land and keep it in good order. So you're saying individuals they just can't do it. So we need to take it away from them and put it in government's hands. Because people can't be good stewards of the land, is what you're saying.
But we're not taking it away from anyone unless they want to sell it.
You're taking it off the rolls. It's government-owned versus private. It is a government versus private property issue. Because in Monroe County, there's only 3%. There's only 3% available for private property. Do you feel comfortable with 97% of Monroe County being owned by some level of government?
We don't answer the question. We ask the question.
So it's not true, right? Y'all don't work for us. I get it.
Senator Lapwell does not send me a Christmas card every year. Good. Janet and Bruce before Paul gets started on this, we want to have Janet and Bruce hand out 3 things. One of them is a Liberty First questionnaire. If you would like, after this presentation, if you're interested in getting emails from us on legislative updates as bills are happening, some inside information, we have that opportunity. So if you want to take a look at that, fill it out however you'd like to, and give it back to us before we leave. Then the other thing is, are y'all familiar with a bill that's being promoted called the Second Amendment Preservation Act? It's a bill, a group down in Naples actually initiated this effort. It's a bill that would basically, an intrastate commerce issue. If a gun manufacturer makes guns or gun products in Florida, and it stays in Florida and is sold to, in Florida, it's not subject to federal regulations. We think this is a good bill to fight for because it's actually a 10th Amendment bill that says, again, the federal government cannot exceed their constitutional authority. So I've given you some information on that bill. There was a petition. If you want to read through and sign the petition, again, you can bring that back to me later. So I just want to make sure you understood what you're getting handed. And with that, I'll give it to Paul.
Okay, we heard about the hospital lobby. How many people do you think are affected by the things that I talked about? Robbers, there's 15 million. Do you think that would make an effective lobby in Tallahassee? These things that we talk about are not really Republican or Democrat type of things. When you look at it, once you think about it, once you get educated on the issue, you'll see it's an American thing. We formed, or we're kind of the genesis of this Liberty First Network. Some friends of ours formed it so we can most effectively deliver the bang for the buck to the citizens of Florida. The idea is lobbying. When you say that, it's got a terrible connotation to most people. I'm going to share a little personal aside. My wife's got kin in Hosford, Florida. Who knows where that is? It's in a little place called Liberty County. Of course, y'all might have heard of the sheriff of Liberty County, Nick Finch. Stand-up man for the Second Amendment. Anyhow, there was a running joke when I went to the Highway Patrol Academy. They always find out where you're from. And the instructor said, "How many are here from Liberty County?" And everybody looks around kind of like y'all did. Nobody raised their hand. And he said, "Well, that's good, because that other fellow would be awful lonesome by himself." That's how small Liberty County is. So my kid in Liberty County, my wife goes over and visits him and says, "Hey, what's your husband doing since he retired from the Highway Patrol?" And my wife said, "Well, he's a lobbyist now." And the very first thing that her aunt said was, "Wow, they make good money." So we are trying to be a pending 501c4. Thank the Lord that the IRS has seen the error of their ways and saying we're not going to hard time these conservative groups anymore. So we're hopeful to get in under the radar on that one there and get all of the paperwork and done and completed and approved. That's another reason why my name's not on it, because anything I have to do with the IRS gets red flagged automatically. For too long, the voice of the citizen has not been heard in the legislature. Again, 2 people or 15 million people, who's going to have more effect on things? Our presentation today, even though we do educational materials as a pending 501c4, we are going to focus on our lobbying aspect. What are we going to do? Going to be a countervailing force against special interests, lobbyists who pressure legislators for bigger government and loss of liberties. Just had a very excellent presentation at the federal level. What's going on with that? We've heard as well things at the state level with health care. That's just one slice of the pie. We're going to research, track, and report proposed legislation as it moves through the legislative process, provide up-to-the-minute legislative alerts to keep you informed and ready to take action. You're going to hear more about this in this presentation. What we do is like I'm a car guy, so I'm going to speak probably to the guys in the room here, no offense, ladies, but it's like having an engine that really puts out a lot of power and having a clutch that slips. If you don't have both of them working together, you don't go anywhere. That's what our up-to-the-minute things are. When we say to take action, that's when the calls and the emails need to be made to the certain people, narrowly and specifically. Organizing and scheduling day at the Capitol events. John has done this. It's been very eye-opening for people to come up and see how this game actually is played. It was very eye-opening for me. Catherine alluded to when we were first up there. John gave us a little bit of a tour around and see how things work, and it's not exactly how you think it does. So why should you use a lobbyist? Again, when we bring up this term, it's boo hiss. You're the bad guys. Well, yeah, most of them are. We go up there are very few people, and I see one sitting here, Dan Peterson, who I will recognize, going to speak after we do, that are lobbying for good things, for property rights, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, things like that. But these other folks that I've talked about, the legions of camera company lobbyists, for example, no, they're liable to take money out of your pocket. This ability that we do, as John mentioned, it's a cornerstone of a constitutional republic. Our founders realized that if we had taxation without representation, we had nothing at all. So we want to be able to redress our grievances with our government, be at the state level, be at the county level. And I'll throw in one other aside here. How many people go to your city or county council meetings? Good. I come from a little place called Monticello. It's a small county of 14,000 people. And I am well known in my community for nothing else by the fact that I go twice a month to my county commission meetings. I made a little joke earlier that when they bring up the term federal money, they always look over at me. And the clerk of court caught himself one time. I'm going to share one more funny story with you here. We're talking about getting a $4 million road bond, which I supported. I did not support getting these grants because I've educated my commissioners on where these grants are coming from. They think it's that magical money tree up in Washington, D.C. that I talked about. But I brought them back down to earth and told them where this money comes from. One time I had to pull my wallet out and show them physically. So at any rate, the clerk of court slipped up and said, but it's free money. And as soon as he said that, he looked right over at me. And I got up to speak. My friend the fire chief said, couldn't let that one slide, could you? I said, no, I couldn't. So inevitably what comes up here is, well, what's you going? Can I do this myself? Or can a few people in my area, my Tea Party group, or can't we do that? Sure you can. But you have to ask yourself, can you perform this or any other specialized task? Can you sew up a wound? Our medical guys left the room. Of course, he wasn't a doctor, was he? But maybe he could. Can you replace the water pump on your car or cook a multi-course gourmet meal? We pay people for their labor and expertise because they can do things we cannot. Be they doctors, mechanics, or chefs, or in this case, what we're talking about, lobbyists, the people that go up there on your behalf and speak to your legislators for things that are of interest to you. Do you have the time to respond to a crisis with a bill and provide information in just a few minutes? John calls us putting out fires. We'll have a bill up there for property rights, let's say. And somebody starts a rumor that, oh, well, this is going to impose a 20% tax on everybody in Florida. We know that's not true, but the bill sponsor doesn't. So we get an angry call from the bill sponsor. What's this about this bill increasing taxes? John and I go meet with them. 5 minutes the fire's put out. No, it's right here, sir, ma'am. That's not the case. It doesn't do that. But if you're 300 miles away, you can't go meet with them easily. That's the value of having a lobbyist there in the building. Do you have the time and money to go to the legislature and stay for a few days to a few weeks? John and I sat down and figured this out. For him to come up, stay at the no-tell motel, eat at the dollar menu at McDonald's. It's about $100 a day by the time the gasoline's factored in for him to drive up there. That's if we pay him nothing for 11 years of experience. Can you reschedule and come back tomorrow? Something that I found out when I was a traffic homicide investigator. One of the most time-consuming things I did was trying to get witness interviews for these fatal crashes. You go make an appointment with somebody, well, something came up, my kid's got to go to the doctor. Can you do it tomorrow? Sure. Well, in the States, dime, so it wasn't too big of a deal. But here, when the legislative aides talk to you, they are constantly scheduling people in 15-minute increments. Sometimes you only get 10 minutes. And something will come up to where, oh, well, you've been bumped Tuesday. Can you come back Thursday at 3:30? If you're only there for a day, you can't. But if you're there all the time, you can. It's not that big of a deal. Do you know which politicians you need to talk to? John talked about this in his presentation. Again, you're focusing your effort. You can put out a broad thing to 160 House members and senators, and it's going to be completely watered down because the very first thing somebody on the environmental committee is going to say, oh, well, this has to do with transportation, and they use for that, so they're not even going to read it. Matter of fact, how many have sent an email to House member at myfloridahouse.gov? How many think it got read? They don't. If you want to have effective communication with your legislator, find out who that legislative aide is, figure out what their email address is, phone number, call them, get a relationship with them once they recognize you, and then of course your emails. Even if you're not recognized, they will answer your email. The legislative aide is the gatekeeper, the key to that legislator. Are you confident enough to speak to several politicians? Public speaking is a challenge. It was for me in 2009. I see Bob's left the room also, but anybody that was unfortunate enough to hear the nails on the chalkboard that was me in 2009 can tell you, it was certainly a struggle. Can't you use volunteers? Yes. And how many volunteers have stuck with active lobbying for anywhere from 3 years, which is me, to 11 years, which is John? It's a commitment. You really have to put a lot of time into it. It's like anything else. If you don't put the time into it, it's not going to come out very good. And I like to say, we appreciate those that volunteer time. I was one that volunteered time. I was the legislative chair for the Tea Party Network. Other things came up, pulled me away from being able to do that. If somebody is working as a volunteer, they have a paying job, I fully understand that paying job comes first because volunteer work does not pay your power bill. We do plan to use college interns. We're in Tallahassee, where we're going to be doing our work. There are a bunch of liberty-minded young folks up there we've identified, and we have a plan to grow this organization, not just to be static, and we want to move forward and increase it. And it's our goal to be more effective than these private companies that are lobbying for things against our liberty, to have a bunch of lobbyists up there for our liberty, representing you, representing things like property rights, transportation issues, taxes, growth of government. And yeah, I'm actually trying to grow the lobbying business, but I'm trying to get some equal time here. And here's a big one. Can't you do this for free? Isn't the session only 60 days? We would like to do so. I did so. 2012, zero. 2013, zero. I made $1,250 in 2011. The economy's been rough on me, I admit personally. The IRS withheld my tax refund last year. 7 months I had to sue them. They're doing it again this year. I'm in a tough spot financially. I make no bones about that. So no, the fact is I cannot do it for free. We broke down the money. It costs money for us to be there. While the session is only 8 weeks, we do a lot of preparation work. We're doing it right now. Some of the things you heard John talk about. We have committee weeks starting at the end of this month, but we need to be there for those to plant the seeds for these bills that we want to have. There are also legislative delegations, and I want to recommend to anybody, if you hear of a legislative delegation coming up, that is money in the bank for you because you don't have to drive to Tallahassee. Tallahassee comes to you. If you're in Columbia County, you'll see Representative Porter, Senator Dean, whoever's district touches that county will be at that legislative delegation, and they have to listen to you. Whether they will or not, I don't know, but you are there, you have the chance to speak to them. Tell them what concerns you, because the very first people you'll see in line are the people from the local governments, and guess what? Their hands out. We would like funding for this, we'd like funding for that. Isn't it expensive to use lobbyists? They make a lot of money, right? Well, come back to my first point there about Liberty County, and you'll understand where I'm coming from. So actually I did research this. Like I said, I'm one of these people that delve into things. Salary.com talks about this. The median salary for a lobbyist in Tallahassee is $92,244 a year. So my aunt was correct. They make good money. The absolute low range, the lower 10%, $57,775. The Cadillac people, $159,493. Government lobbyists, as I spoke about, people at the red light cameras. When you see people up there, government relations people, that guy that the highway safety, my friend, Mr. Montgomery, that came from the Southern Strategies Group, the red light camera lobbying company, now works for the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. He's doing it for $75,000 a year. When I broke down, the average pay for a government relations employee is about $70,000 a year. Now, when you add to that the benefits, such as a conservatively, a 20%, 25% retirement, withholding, things like that, not factoring in health care, that's at least 25%, so their number's more like $88,000 a year. John and I are free market capitalists. We love the free market, but we can get the job done for a lot less. It literally takes just a few dollars a month from those concerned enough to be involved. That's you, those are your friends, those are your people that you're talking to about this idea of less government. Isn't it just used by special interests and large corporations? You'd have to define the special interest because technically the Second Amendment's a special interest of mine, as is the 10th Amendment. But there's nobody up there. That fellow at the beginning talking, there's no lobbyists in Washington for smaller honest government. There's nobody up there lobbying for the 10th Amendment. I'll go up there and I'll speak. I am known by many legislators as the red light camera guy. I've been pigeonholed because I go up there and I speak to them. I've got a lifetime of career experience dealing with that issue from traffic crashes. I'm also the real ID guy. I go up there and I talk to them. Something I didn't get to in my earlier presentation. Last session, no relief for real ID, no relief for citizens. But the very first bill signed by Governor Scott gave relief to foreign tourists from having to have an international driver's license. It was cheered. Well, yeah, it's a common sense thing. But guess what? That law was, how many here know what nullification is? That law was nullified by a sheriff in Sarasota County that said, we're not going to enforce it. It's further nullified by the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles saying, we're not going to enforce it. You know why? It wasn't because of the U.S. Constitution, it was because of the Geneva Convention. You know? So the other thing that went through, flew through, with very little opposition, was a bill to use the deferred action letters for driver's licenses that would allow certain illegal aliens to skip to the front of the line, say, here, I've got a paper from the government, give me a driver's license even though I'm here illegally. And I stood up and I spoke and I spoke and I spoke about that. And it just bounced right off. But if I had the support of 15 million people, which I think on that one, maybe a little bit less, maybe I'd get 13 million. Okay, but if I had that type of support up there behind me when I'm talking, that's where we're trying to get this organization to be effective, to be politically effective on things like that. Governor Scott, by the way, he signed the first one. Governor Scott surprised me. He vetoed that illegal alien driver's license law. Very surprised by that, but he did. And I will give credit where it's due. Local governments pay a lobbying firm or have government regulate relations employees. The fellow that I talked to, Mr. Montgomery, $75,000 a year. The guy that gave me the price on Real ID, that $10 million, he was making $82,000 a year. And you can also look up on the state, that's one other good thing the Governor Scott's done, is opened up the salary where you can look and see any particular individual who works for the state, how much money they actually make, which is where I found this. And I like to say for reference, the Highway Patrol pays their troopers about $36,000 a year. So you can see where the focus is. The lobbyist is worth twice as much as a trooper. Government spent millions of dollars on lobbying in addition to the highway safety. The Sunshine Review in 2009 looked at what Florida school districts spent. It was over $1.2 million. Now that was 4 years ago. I think they're spending more or less now. My money's on more. My little county, speaking of which, up in Monticello, we have a legislative delegation. We hired a lobbyist to make sure that our prisons stay open. So up in North Florida, the prisons, or here in North Florida, the prisons are kind of a big deal for small counties. And so Dade County actually hired a lobbyist to go lobby the government to keep the state prison open, keep it from being privatized, which actually I agree with, because the prison's a necessary function of our government. But that shows you they do, in fact, use lobbyists. The Florida League of Cities, FLC, and the Association of Counties both lobby for their respective government agencies. They're paid via dues from local governments. So I call them a quasi-government lobbyist because they're still the bottom line is they're funded by our tax dollar to be up there lobbying. The League of Cities is a vocal supporter of the red light camera program, despite these devices failing in 9 out of 10 elections when they've been put to a vote. Who do you think the FLC is really representing? Is it you, or is it your local government? We have a plan to succeed. Having the best lobbyist in the world with no popular support takes millions of dollars to be effective. Citizens do not have millions of dollars. Citizens have votes. See, being effective politically, which I'm going to sum up very briefly in the next slide. Having a good lobbyist with popular support does not take millions of dollars, but it takes involvement at 2 stages. To be effective politically, to touch on what John said very briefly, you have to show you're serious, which is another one of my nicknames, by the way. You have to be backed by numbers. Remember the 15 million versus the 2? Will inflict pain. We talked about a senator losing an election. Did you know, as a matter of fact, recently here in Colorado, 2 legislators have been recalled and thrown out of office on the Second Amendment. That is pain. Politicians are in it, for the most part, for power. Power is re-election. Consistency. You will be back next year. I didn't get the nickname, the red light camera guy, from just going up there and talking at one committee meeting. I've gone up and I've talked, and I've talked, and I've talked. 3 years now. John's a lot better than I am, obviously, because he's been there 11 years. The lobbyist is the boots on the ground. This is where the 2 stages come in. If the legislature knows what's happening on a daily basis, a bill can change direction in a matter of hours. I saw the red light camera bill in the Senate die from one amendment. And I stood up to speak. One of the senator's aides came over and said, no, just keep your mouth shut. We're going to fix it in the next committee. Well, it never made it in the next committee. It's such is life. But that's how quickly things happen. The people the lobbyist represents that make calls, send emails, and letters are the driving force. This is the 15 million right here. Once a politician realizes the lobbying power of the voting citizen, the citizen will have a louder voice in government. This feeds upon itself because the lobbyist then has greater influence as more citizens participate. And as we grow this, please don't take this wrong. I want to grow this organization. I don't want to have 2 lobbyists in Tallahassee. I'd like to have 6. That way I can focus on transportation, the stuff that's near and dear to me. John can focus on property rights. We might have somebody else dealing with septic tanks. We might have somebody else dealing with environmental regulations, who knows? But this is a very specialized area. It takes a lot of time and involvement. As John said earlier in his presentation, timing is everything. If we send calls, emails, and letters at the wrong time, it's a waste of time. If they're sent at the right time, they're going to be of great value. John used the analogy, John, you got to have these people stop calling when the phone's ringing off the hook. We're retarded, we're affected. They're hearing from us. The lobbyist knows when to alert the citizens so they can do their part, and their communications will have the greatest effect. I want to blow our horn a little bit here. We found language in the 2012 Florida law that would have allowed the state to place an electronic tracking chip on every driver's license starting in 2013. You have to know how to read these bills. Did I look through the bill and find RFID, radio frequency ID? No, I didn't. I found a term that said electronic authentication. I knew about that because in 2011, a senator in Miami tried to do the same thing. So I was kind of knew what to look for. In 2012, I found it. I read through it. I said, well, really, there's only one line that needs to go away here. I went, Catherine was in the room with me when we went there, and I talked to the freshman that was sponsoring the bill. Very nice guy from Central Florida. Met with him, brought him up to speed on why this is hazardous, told him about RFIDs being cloned without the holder being knowledgeable about it. He said, wow, I never knew that. Like I said, it turns out we both knew somebody that went through the Highway Patrol Academy with, and good connection. I asked him, sir, can you just take this one line out about electronic authentication? He took the entire section out of the bill. It was tremendous, a tremendous victory. And that's the value of having somebody there. And not that I'm buddy-buddy with the guy, but it was funny because the next week I was there for a red light camera bill, who happened to be sitting next to me but him. So we chatted about things, and for what it's worth, I think we've got an ally on that. He would vote against the red light camera bill. We've argued for property rights, firearm rights, and voters, the anti-red light camera rights. Our short-term plans, we're working on a firearm and red light camera bills right now. The Second Amendment Preservation Act and motorist rights. We're also helping in the battle against Common Core. Other areas we plan to work on are integrity and licensing. I'm talking integrity about the police chief making $2,000 a month in retirement. I'm talking integrity about the $30 million question on the red light camera tickets. There's a lot of work to be done there. We work as a team with others that have similar interests, such as opposing Common Core educational standards. Like you, we don't agree with everyone on everything, but we can work with those on issues that we agree with. We're not going to cut off our nose to spite our face, as my mom used to say. Our long-term plans, with over 2,000 bills to review each year, it's not possible for 2 people to review and act upon them. Lobbying, like medicine, has specialty areas. We plan on using college students as interns, training them to work as paid lobbyists as the organization grows. There's a saying that if you catch a fish for a man, feed him, you feed him for one day. But if you teach him to fish, you feed him for life. It's kind of along those lines. When I was a sergeant on the Highway Patrol, I taught one of my troopers the arduous process, and it's not like on CSI, the process of getting a search warrant on a criminal case. One of the other supervisors said, why are you taking all the time to do that? I said, because now the next one that needs to do it doesn't need to come to me, the sergeant. They go to the trooper who will teach them how to do it. Same principle. We were formed, this is what we said this morning, but I'll read it again. The Liberty First Network was formed to restore the access of the people to politicians that's been lost. Most people cannot afford the hundreds of dollars in travel and lodging to meet with their elected legislator during session. Once there, they're unsure about what to say or afraid to speak publicly. Unless they number in the tens of thousands, calls, cards, and emails are not as effective as meeting in person. Special interests, which include our own government, agencies such as cities and school boards, spend millions each year trying to influence legislation. Government officials and quasi-government agencies such as the League of Cities are sent to lobby on our tax dollar on issues that are at times anti-liberty. Lobbying is something the First Amendment recognizes. We can redress our grievances with our government. I've talked to you about our track record on microchips, defending property rights. You saw John Hallman in action. Folks, that's what we do. We go there and we talk to these politicians. We are polite with them. John's very polite. He's got more tact than I do many times. And we don't go there to get in fights with them. But we do go there to stand up for your rights, to stand up for the rights of the people of Florida. And that's our job. The time to start working on the next session is right now. As I mentioned to you, later this month, legislative committees are going to be starting. Again, the example, if we took $5 from one person, we have to pay $50 for the state to lobby for that one person. But if we take the money from the Liberty First Network, we pay $50. And this is the great idea that some people had, so we're trying to make the best of it. Individuals can and must donate to us. It costs us $100 a day. If we do not pay them anything, to me, just the time that I spent with John Hallman's worth a whole lot of money. Look at the process. It's a 12-month per year job, not just 60 days. Is this work less skilled or important than a minimum wage work? And the bottom line is what I ask, and this is my little catchphrase that I made up, what is your liberty worth to you? That's our spiel. We have a website, it's libertyfirstflorida.org. We are a pending 501c4 nonprofit, so donations are not tax deductible. And I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I would just like to say that we have the organization, we're trying to raise money, but we're not trying to be the only organization. We feel like we're a network of all of your organizations. And I also want to say that, my goal, starting out 11 years ago, is that we have a team of people up there, professional lobbyists fighting for individual liberty, constitutional rights. And so I'm real excited because Paul's now working with us for the last 3 years, and also 2 other organizations. I believe you should support other organizations as well. And your next speaker is Dan Peterson. And Dan started, I believe, last year, right, with the Coalition for Property Rights. You just came on board 2 years ago. And Dan has been very proactive in coming to Tallahassee and fighting on property rights issues and stopping Agenda 21. So I'm excited that he's up there, and Dan and I are working together. And so Dan's got a great organization, Coalition for Property Rights. Tomorrow you're going to be hearing from Randy Osborne, who's done a fantastic job. Y'all have heard Randy, been fighting Common Core. He's doing a great job. Randy is now is a registered lobbyist with Eagle Forum, and he's coming up now. And I got to be with Randy, so we're starting to put some organizations and some people together. As Paul said, we're going to change the way things are done in Tallahassee. For too long, things have been done one way. And so if we do anything over the next few years, they're going to realize things are changing. And that's coming from you all. Because what Dan does and what I do and Paul and Randy, we're only as effective every day in Tallahassee as what you all are doing at home, making the phone calls and doing all the hard work. We're getting their attention. I'm more optimistic this session coming up than I probably have ever been in the 11 years I've been doing this. So we're making progress. You're getting their attention. You're irritating them, actually, which is good. So keep up the great work. Dan's going to give a great presentation here in a few minutes, and we're going to be there fighting, and we appreciate anything you can do. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you. Catherine just asked, we have a recall here in Florida, and we do not. Might be a good idea for a bill, though. It did, you're right, yeah. So it'd be a constitutional amendment, but it would be interesting. Yes, ma'am?
I'd like to know, I was going to ask about recall. I would like to see that started.
Yeah, I would too, yeah.
And the other thing was, do you know, or is there someone here who knows what percentage of private property we have in Columbia County?
I have that at home. I don't have it with me. Maybe I don't know if Dan has that or...
He'll be able to answer that question.
But it might surprise you how little is in private property. Because if you think about it, I mean, not only conservation land, but when every level of government owns, buildings and real estate holdings, besides conservation land, right now what we do know, and Dan will talk about this, is that just conservation land alone in Florida by federal, state, and local is 28%. And they want to keep it going more and more and more. You know, and one thing I said to Jack Lapford, you know, is enough enough? Enough. You know, give me a number. Is it 70%? That wasn't on the video. I'm asking, is it 70%, 60, 40, 30? What's the number, Senator? You know, yeah, what's the number? So, that's one thing I always tell everybody. You know, we're going to start asking them questions. And that's what I wanted to get across to him, is that this thing about your arrogance and you don't want to hear from us, that's one of the things we're changing. And so when I get up there, I'm going to ask them questions. If they want to kick me out, then kick me out. But I'm asking questions. So I'm sick of that. But anyhow, to your point, it's quite shocking how much land the levels of government own in Florida. I think it's probably, when you take other real estate holdings, buildings, military bases and such, it's probably over 50% is owned by government in Florida. So we're going in a bad direction.
3-0.
You talking about all real estate holdings? Okay.
Hold on just a second.
I didn't hear. Yeah, well, that's a whole nother subject, and Dan can probably get into that too. But you know about the regional planning councils, RPCs. There's 11 of them across the state of Florida. I don't know if you've heard of 750 down in Florida, but these regional planning councils have a tremendous amount of, I don't want to say authority, but influence in guiding these counties and to taking up more and more land and pushing Agenda 21 policies. So that's one thing that I'm going to talk to Dan about, is how we can kind of attack the influence that these regional planning councils have. I mean, personally, it's probably a dream, but closer or further away. It's probably a pipe dream, but I'd actually like to repeal them and have them gone away. But I mean, it's going to be a hard battle. But does that answer your question? Sort of, kind of. Oh yeah, I mean, the thing is with Agenda 21 is, as far as I know, there's no real hard binding signed contractual agreement other than every county commissioners and these planning councils, regional planning councils, are very influenced by Agenda 21. Of course, we know the ICLEI, there were, I don't know how many county commissioners and mayors were members of that. But we have to attack what they're doing, which is taking up more and more land. I mean, so I personally don't get real wrapped up in talking to them about Agenda 21, but about the damage that's being done. Whether it's Agenda 21 or just radical environmentalism in general, that these people want to squeeze us all into these cluster communities. And let me just, I'm going to wrap up, but watch out. This is something that I'm tackling. This whole thing about corporate welfare and economic development is all geared to push Agenda 21. And if you look at the Department of Economic Opportunity created by Governor Scott, it is full of sustainable, environmental sustainability, how they want to marry economic growth and preserving the environment, sustainable growth. And so all this economic growth we're hearing from Governor Scott, his corporate welfare, has given him millions and millions of dollars to these wealthy corporations, is all to push. I don't know if he's doing it overtly or if he acknowledges that that's what's happening, but it's pushing Agenda 21. And so the corporate welfare's got to stop. And we did make some headway last year with that, but something to be aware of, because they're using economic growth, corporate welfare, to push green Agenda 21 policies. So anyhow, I better wrap up and let our next speaker come up. Thank you.